Hello, welcome to Out of State DMing. I'm your host, Lux Blackheart, and your co host.
Iskian inside.
And today's special guest is.
Coyote Singh. Hello.
Join us as we discuss 3.5 D&D. Today's episode will be centered around elves. We'll be talking about some of their physical attributes, relations to other races, and their traits. With a bonus segment from our special guest about some of the questions he has prepared for us. Hopefully, we don't automatically accidentally answer them before we get to that segment. We'll be starting off talking about the standard. I don't know why everything went dark for a moment. Uh, the standard elf, which is the uh, everyone's favorite high elf. So say hi. Uh, They are the everyone's pretty standard elf general description of being as low as 4.5 feet to on average to 5.5 feet. So they are short. So if you ever thought that you were short, just remember elves are generally short too. Doesn't matter if it's male or female. Um,
They average between 4.5 to 5.5 feet.
Thank you for repeating me.
Oh,
I knew
sorry,
today
sorry,
was going
sorry,
to
sorry.
be a good day. um,
So the question I have is, what race do you think Legolas was, or which
uh,
elf do you think he was?
that is a very hard to answer question. To go off of height, there's not that many elves that are around that actual same height as man, unless the people in the land are short. If you
But they did
take
a good
into
job
Right.
of making
account
the
that
tall people short.
the what,
They did a good job of making the tall people look short.
pretty much yeah. Um, but then you have to take into account that those elves are nowhere the same as the elves because their ability to see technically through elven bullcrappery breaks the normal line of sight because they don't suffer from the effect known as the curvature of the earth. So if they're constantly seen in a straight line, there is no drop off for them. There has to be actual physical things between them and where they're looking at. So there is no drop off. So to the elves, the world is flat. They're flat earthers because that's how they perceive the world. I'm not even kidding. They also can walk on snow while everyone else is practically trying to mush through it. If everyone else is like going, man, this is waist high snow. There's Legolas just walking on the top like he weighs nothing. So it's extremely hard to pinpoint without having to create an entire new D&D elven race to support those elves in their entirety.
Right.
So we can't say what elf they are because you have they're taller than most of the elven races, and they have features that just don't work because they're broken. But moving on, uh, I should have to mute this side just in case someone joins chat and I have to be able to properly respond. Uh, Elves, besides being averaging out between 4.5 to 5.5, their weight averages out between 95 and 135. So they lightweights. Uh, but then there's the fact that they are, if memory serves, the longest living race for the standard ones. Because they reach adulthood at 110. Men, remember, that's adulthood when they are
Yeah.
technically reach their sexual maturity, when they can start getting married and have kids, which that is multiple generations of a lot of the other races. So when a elf joins a party, he's technically older than their most of the races, like grandparents or some of them great grandparents.
They'll have lived through at least three and a half generations of humans.
Pretty much, yes. Because humans top age is like 90 at
Yeah, well,
best.
generation is 30
Yeah,
years.
yeah. So it's like, yeah. And they can live to be more than 700 years of age. So if an elf is like, man, I'm reaching the end of my age, it's like, oh dear God, you've been around through just about everything. So if like elves would exist, if elves exist today, there would be elves that could tell us how the Dark Ages went. There's elves who can go, I was part of Napoleon's campaign. You want my war journal? History would be so much more accurate and detailed if elves existed, because there would be elves going, let's say, I could tell you secondhand and direct secondhand information about the Roman Empire because some of my family lived there during the rise and fall of the Roman Empire. They could go, oh, I knew elves that were there when it was a republic, before it was an empire. Does That's a thing. There were elves that could tell you, it's like, oh, this is actually around the times we actually came across the sea from England and stuff to the Americas. This is actually what people did because I kept records of it. This is how World War II and World War One actually went because, well, they could literally live through it. Uh, because they can. Uh, And when it comes to how they treat a lot of the other races, they consider humans rather unrefined, uh, halflings a bit stand, gnomes somewhat trivial, and dwarves not at all fun. They look at half elves with some degree of pity, and they regard half orcs with unrelenting suspicion because they hate orcs.
Yeah.
Uh, while Yeah, elves are not particularly. I'm trying to yeah, wild haunty. Elves are not particularly the way halflings and dwarves can be. They are generally pleasant and graceful, even to those who fall short of elven standards. Uh, but yeah, they can still be nice people and stuff. Even though atypical one of the typical ways to describe elves in general, to describe how they do stuff, is mostly arrogant assholes. It's
Some of
exter-
them are reclusive,
Oh, some of them
like
are extremely seclusive, and That's more on what realm you're playing in, not them there, because you have to remember, their different realms do literally have different depictions of some of them. It's like the high elves. There's more high elves make an appearance in more than one um, realm,
right.
and they're not particularly same. It's like if you're in Forgotten Realms, the high elves there don't go normally by high elves; they go by Sylvanesti. Not to be confused with the Sylvan elves, which is the name given. It's a common name given to wood elves of the Greyhawk universe. So
Right.
you, it's in a way you have like, oh, it's this, but it's this, but it's that, but it's this. And then you have different realms where the high elves are have slightly different statistics, mostly the same, but there's slight differences in how they treat things, like the Kingdom of Calamar. The high elves there have slightly different statistics and are generally not as friendly because Kingdom of Calamar has a lot of political in-game wars and confrontation stuff that's going back and forth.
Right.
So they're not necessarily as friendly as they normally would be. Uh, so it gets kind of in when it comes to what elves you're talking about. Um, Elves are kind of more or less uh, really good with each other's. It's like if you go to one of the main territories in Greyhawk for Selene, that's a kingdom of high elves. They're somewhat asholish to a point, but the amount of infighting there is extremely low. It's more about infighting on what spells the best, who's makes the better wizard, not actual like we're gonna have civil war tomorrow. It's just more like just
Right.
occasional rivalry between an individual and not a faction versus faction because they're pretty solidified like that.
There should be a civil war tomorrow. Send out the elves.
Yeah, you have to remember there's one of the races that we will be talking about. Technically, there was an Elven Civil War, and that did not help anyone because it didn't actually thin out the elves. It created a new type of elf, and lots of problems came from that.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
there's already chronologically a civil war that's happened that technically still has an end, even though one side technically lost. It's just they're constantly trying to keep it going and technically constantly losing because it's gone from a racial civil war to several other races joining in on it, going, ha 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 ha, you suck.
And because
Right.
we will beat you down.
Yeah. Um, Going into some of the things that, hey, look, we have a viewer. Hi, viewer. Wave to the viewer,
Yay,
people.
viewer.
Hello.
Um, some of the stuff that the high elves get. Uh, they get a bonus to Dex minus the con, so they're not very hit pointy. They can't tank as much of damage as other races can. Standard speed. They are immune to sleep effects and get a +2 on saving throws against enchantment spells or effects. So anything that counts as
Just
an
have like a
kind of like charm person,
someone
dominate. They're
so
like, oh,
basically, you know, eyes themselves as human and they try to cast sleep on them.
yeah. Well, yeah, looking at it says like I'm immune to magical sleep effects, which I can say people mix that up with the non-magical sleep effects with all sleep effects. When it's like this isn't a magical sleep effect, this is a sleep
Oh,
poison. This they're
yeah,
not immune
potions
to
will.
sleep
No.
effect. Well, if it's a magical potion,
Yeah, that's why
it's
it
magical. If it's a like child
emphasizes
sleep
magical sleep
poison,
effect. They're not immune to it.
that's a poison, not magic. Therefore, it does affect them.
Yeah.
It's wording of the effect versus the racial trait. This a trait says magical sleep effects, not sleep effects. Not the same thing. Because there's magic, non-magic. It's a pretty fine line. This if I like, blow sleep powder in your face, you have to do that for you. So you have to go to sleep. Sleep. There's no I'm immune. This is non-magical base. So night night. They get low light vision, which is neat. Does it help them stay in shadow illumination? They are automatically proficient with yeah, elves receive the martial proficiency feats for long swords, rapiers, longbows, including the composite, short bows, including the composite, bows it as well. Yeah, you get those as bonus feats. Yeah, and it's pretty unless stated otherwise in other elven stat blocks, they get those weapons for free. Well, not for they the weapons themselves free. They get the proficiencies for free. They get a bonus to spot certain listen checks, which is hands down always good because being able to see and or hear something trying to sneak up on you, I don't care what level you are. A +2 is still a +2, and it's still really good.
Well,
Uh,
elves are supposed to have
Right.
superior sensors to the other races anyway.
yeah. They also, if they pass within 5 feet of a secret or concealed door, they are entitled to a search check to notice it as if they were actively looking for it. The easiest way to play that off is anytime an elven player walks by it, the DM makes a secret roll and goes, "Hey, as you're walking by this roll, you're pretty sure you notice something. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. You elven biatch, nit, nit, nudge, nudge."
Well, I mean, it's kind of like, don't the doors kind of have something
Uh,
similar to that?
their ability is similar, and if you watch, even though it's technically in two parts due to internet problems, if you watch it, it is covered on their ability, and it's similar, but not 100% the same.
It's only
Okay,
made
Mainly because it's 10 feet, not 5 feet.
right.
Uh,
well that
the
and it's a stone based thing.
Yeah, it is stone based, not everything based. It's stone based. It's more Pacific, so it's like Uh, their favorite class is wizard, so they do like intelligent individuals, intellectuals, some might say.
Yeah,
So they do love their arcane shenanigans, because that's always fun and entertaining. Especially when the person goes fireball in a crowded room with no escape.
I don't care how big the room is. I cast fireball.
Yes.
I don't care if I'm still in the room with all my allies. It happens to be an empowered and maximized fireball. I'm still hitting fireball. Everyone's now dead.
Don't they have a? Oh no,
It's a
I
plus
don't
two
want to go
against
off.
enchantment spells. Not all spells,
Yeah,
enchantment.
but
Fireball
isn't
is good.
there a? Uh, isn't isn't there a class where you can selectively choose not to target your allies
I thought
There's
when casting a spell?
there's two
that's
It's
ways.
meta magic. Okay, yeah,
There's a meta magic feat that does it, and if you get high enough level to be an archmage, one of their higher arcanes, does that you exclude an entire area, not necessarily individuals, but an entire area. But that's a
gotcha.
conversation for a later date.
And then yeah, I don't want to get off the tangent.
Um,
You
no, but in general, it's elves are not a bad race to play. Uh,
know, no, they're not.
they are
No,
somewhat elegant individuals. Uh,
I, I'm. I mean, I would play them as a rogue or a wizard. Yeah.
well, like I said, because how their culture works, they technically do have rogues, but it's not a high thing. It's one of those why are you playing a rogue situations. Not you can't play a rogue. It's why because Elvins not only produce really good wizards, they're also known for good sorcerers, uh, good rangers, and good fighters. Because those are the like, four classes
Right.
that are most common for any of their any of their
Well, I
adventurers.
mean, they could. Uh, well, another type you could say classing a rogue as a scout.
Well,
Doesn't have to
if
specifically.
if you're going to try to go for a stealth based thing, you would have to hope the DM is using expanded classes or
Yeah.
expanded things, because then you can actually play certain classes that are more in line with you wanting to play a scout, with you trying to play something that goes more along the times of I'm going to be outside doing adventure stuff in support of the team, not where's the trap at? I need to backstab someone. Does the actual
Right.
class scout is really good at just that, getting to places faster and scouting them faster. It's a very decent race. But then you have other books that can let in the other outdoorsy things like the Infiltrator, which is also really good at doing outside things, or the Brigand. Dun dun dun. Who's pretty much a rogue that's really good at scaring people into running away. Does they eventually get powers like that?
Fear me, I am
Right.
ready.
Yeah. Uh, my brain just freaking stopped working for no apparent reason. Uh, when it comes to their religions, uh,
Oh,
typically
but
they're
wow.
it's Corlin the Fae. Well,
Yeah.
the Thane. Uh, Sometimes you can find them worshiping some of the other gods, but primarily, like 9 out of every 10, it's going to be a little Corellian, because he is their patron god. He is their go-to person.
Right.
Kind of like how other races have, like, this is my go-to god. It doesn't matter if he's good for my class or not, not because of he's more that direction, not this direction. This is my man. That's him. He's their man. He's
Right.
their goat. He's their go-to. He's the person that that the cities, towns, kingdoms, and stuff are raised on. There's others, but that's their go-to. It's like if you don't, it's like if you press default, it's Krillin Le Fay. Some of their physical features besides their height is they have very narrow features. While humans
Yeah.
can be described as somewhat more like broad faced, elves are more narrow, so like longer chins, like more pointed, not like out like that, but more pointed, a little bit angled, more angled jawline, narrower cheek features. Uh, their bridge to their nose can be easily defined as more,
Coraline?
yeah, core-lined. That and pointy ears, long pointy ears. Uh, to the point that if you put a human and elf next to each other, you're like, well, I know what one's the elf. They're wearing hats. He has pointier features. He has slender, pointier face. He's also shorter than the human. So it's like, that's the elf. Half elves are somewhat more in between. Their facial thing is still a little. It's a little bit more narrow than a human. Jawline is more elevated, boom, and their ears are about at best uh half the length of full blood elves, because it's more of like the human ear but with an actual point.
Right.
Well, they're half human, so what do you
Yeah.
expect?
Oh well, you wouldn't believe the amount of people who have come in with half elves and they describe it, and you stop and you look and go, you just described all the features of an elf, not a half elf, a full blooded elf. Not a human with elven features or an elf with human features. You described an elf. Everything you just described. Elf. Which is like when it makes you go, so you're playing an elf? No, I'm a half elf. but everything you described as elfin, it's like because if you look at it, it's like, huh, I'm not seeing any human there,
Now,
which is
now,
like,
do the half elves get the the
half
elves
elves are
don't
getting
sleep.
their own
But,
episode. So when it comes to
okay,
what
all
half
right.
elves get, half elves are just like half orcs because of their lack of diversity. If those are definitely going to be short episodes because it's pretty cutthroat to the dry, and we'll be discussing that on a later episode because they might get a shared episode where part of the episode is half elf, the other half is half orc, because again, there's extremely
Oh, okay.
limited amount of information to talk about them because it's pretty much here's their box.
Yeah.
Uh, but now at this point, we're going to talk about something that was partially mentioned earlier with the whole Civil War thing. Uh, at a particular point in in Elven history, there was a legit civil war between Corellin Le Fay and his wife, who for the life of me can't remember her original name, but she goes by Loth now, where got a big stick up her butt, and it was one
It was the
envied into being one of the most evil gods ever.
Now you're talking about the crown wars.
Yeah, when the
Oh, no,
elf,
no, no, no.
when no, it wasn't.
Yeah, okay.
Uh, yeah, it's because when she switched off and didn't want anything to do with her husband, didn't want to do all this stuff here. She wanted to do all this evil, wrong crap, and it pretty much broke down to her followers versus his followers and all of the other elves, and she lost. What was left of her followers was then shoved into the Underdark and kind
Yeah.
of just like swept under the rug to the fact that technically most of the surface world doesn't know what a drow is. And that's technically accurate because the average Joe, like even the average adventurer goes, what's a drow? What is that? It's a
Well, I
ghost
mean,
skinned elf? What
in
the
Forgotten
Forgotten
Realms.
Realms, it that's realm specific. To some realms, drow are more
Oh,
prevalent
okay.
as not just
Okay.
background bad guys, but as forefront bad guys. And that's one thing that you have to remember about forefront and background. Background is they exist, they're there. Yeah. Forefront is more people are going to know about them. More people are going to be able to do stuff about them because they know about them.
Right.
But hmm, in general term, the average person, in general, discount adventurers and stuff, don't know what a drow is, other than it's a elf that other elves don't want to talk about because it's on site with those other elves. It
It's
doesn't
taboo.
matter. Well, it's not taboo. It's if it's depicted as a drow walks into an area where there is any other elves. Those elves will look at it, pull their weapons, and immediately try to kill it. Like
They're
no
Yeah.
killing.
warnings, no things there. They'll just go, "It's a killing time." It's like, but to describe some of the stuff with the drow, I'm going to let my co-hosts dominate part of this segment because he's going to talk about some of their stuff. So go ahead and take it away.
Well, most of my stuff that I know about Drow is Faerun. Um, they live in the Underdark,
Yep.
and it's a very vicious place. Being able to survive there, you have to be vicious, and it's a matriarchal society. The breakdown is females are mostly priestesses, males are either warriors or have to do with magic, sorcerers, mostly wizards. A warrior will give his life to protect his matriarch. the matriarch, whatever the matriarch says goes. And whether you want to argue the point or not, the Drow are an evil society,
Run by females, if I remember correctly.
matriarchal.
Oh yeah, so that's what
Um,
matriarchy means.
the
Oh yeah,
and you have to be evil as a society to have Loth as your one and only god. Are there other Drow that despise their life? Yes, they don't like the evilness and all that good stuff. But if anybody gets a whiff of that, they're dead. So hardly anybody knows. If you if you kill somebody, as long as you can get away with it, or your house is as powerful, your house is powerful enough, it doesn't matter. Backstabbing is a daily sport and way of life for Drow.
right.
For those of you that go, but what about Drizzt? Well, he got lucky and had plot
He's an
armor.
exception.
Um,
Remember what I said
and
earlier, though. Don't get me in trouble.
I just said he got lucky, had plot armor.
I hate plot armor.
I
He
mean,
used what I mean, how evil, how good can you really be if one of your punishments is to turn people that you caught doing something that you consider wrong into a drider, which is a half elf, half
it
spider.
well, it wasn't just that punishment the Drow did. They
It's a
did
list of
something
punishments. A
messed up.
drider is one of those punishments. That's why they're listed as a memory serves an aberration, and it's also one of the reasons
Mhm.
why they're technically insane, and why a lot of times when they're turned into it, they're kind of just thrown in the Underdark because they do view Drow as a food source, and they
Yeah.
are capable of breeding still. So there is people who were turned into it, Vita, Loth going bad you, and then people who were literally born to it
Well, I mean, the enemies that the Drow captured,
aren't
there's
turned
a
into
lore behind.
Drider.
No,
Well,
those
not
are
just
slaves.
Driders,
He's
but there
talking
was
about
mirrors.
drow punishments they
Oh,
do to drow, not
oh.
what they do to those they capture. Because they have
Fair enough.
two things they do to those who capture: slave labor. Well, actually, it's three: slave labor, cannon fodder, sacrifice to Loth.
Yeah.
And you don't have a say in what one you get a B. You're going to want whatever ends your misery as soon as possible. But there's no guarantee that you're going to be either one. You could be immediately put on choppy block and sacrifice to Loth. You could be have spells break your mind so that way you're obedient little cannon fodder and you're sent into one of their wars they have with everything else in the Underdark. Or they go, we want this stuff done here, but we're too lazy to do it. That's why we have you. Here's a whip. Whoopsh.
Like Artemis.
And by the way, the whip will inject poison into you if you get hit by it.
Yes, yes, it would. It
Yeah.
would. That is a very much. I hope you enjoy suffering. Guess what? Where there's a whip, whoosh, there's poison. Um, but yeah,
And not the fun kind.
my co-host here is completely correct. They are extremely vile, and for people trying to say, well, there's good ones. Technically,
They didn't add him in until fifth edition. Well, no.
no, they
Fi-
didn't add them until fifth edition. Technically speaking, there is elves that have tried to break off, but like he said, the moment anyone finds out that you're technically doing something that can classify as heresy, you're screwed
They're killed.
because
It's
they
Yeah.
literally a prison break.
yeah, that's exactly what it is. It's I don't want to worship Loth. I want to worship this thing over here, or at minimum, it's like I don't want to do all this stuff here. I have to plot my escape not just from the controlled zone of whatever house you're associated with or city you're associated with, but the entire Underdark, because you're going to get hunted. There's going to be hunters and assassins coming
Yeah.
to kill you. Assassins are just going to kill you on the spot. Hunters are going to bring you back to the city so you can be made an example of, because that's what they do. And even though there is some gods trying to better the Drow, they're either realm Pacific or just suck at it. Because again, Loth is one of those. Unless it's one of the permitted entities I'm permitting you to worship, you're going to die for worshiping it. That's how much of religious persecution that society has. Like 100%, if you're not worshiping this, you're going to die because they don't stand for it. So the moment someone suspects you of not even believing in another god, but not believing in Drow, you're immediately being looked into, and you have to keep it such a secret that no one in your family can know. Because it's not like, oh, this family here secretly
Right.
follows this. No, it's you follow it, and you're hiding it from all of your siblings, if you have any, your father, your mother, your cousins, your neighbors, anyone you consider a friend, because you don't know who to trust. And the moment you let it slip that you don't venerate her, there's a good chance that you're going to die the same day. There's a chance you're going to get turned into a strider. There's a chance you're going to get sacrificed. There's a chance you're going to get whipped into submission and then thrown in the slave pits or fed to one of the many giant spiders the Drow use. There is no room for compromise. There is no room for we're going to give you a chance. It is very much this is what Loth wants, so this is what we're going to do. So when my co-host did say that there was a lucky plot armored individual, he literally had plot armor.
Mhm.
If you remove the plot armor, would he have
He may
really
not
made it out
survive.
of the Underdark? Because the Underdark
He could
is,
have.
yeah, there's a chance, but it's not necessarily an overwhelming chance. The Underdark is literally Australia on crack cocaine. The amount of thing,
If I remember right, he actually had help from a couple of other individuals that didn't make it.
yeah, but you can also count that into plot armor as into why he
Yeah.
got to make it. Was there was other individuals present that got killed so he could move on. And then by the time he actually got out, where are those people? Are their names mentioned? Do anyone know their names? No, they're forgotten individuals that were killed off so that way he could live because the plot demanded it.
Well, yeah. Otherwise, Ari Salvatore wouldn't have had a drought to write about.
Exactly. So a big part of it does come into uh, how do we get this person to survive the Underdark? Because at any given moment, you could be accosted by a large group of cave trolls. You could have random oozes popping up. There are specific dragons that love dwell down there that will simply go, "Oh, you wanted some warmth and maybe some light, so you're gonna hang around this stream of lava? Well, here's a magma dragon popping out of it, going surprise, mother heavens." And if anyone knows any better, they know that they should just run. Because there is no, I'm going to smack it with my sword and defeat it. No, you're going to
No.
smack it with your sword.
No.
Your sword's going to be gone because it's a molten dragon. And you
Yeah.
say, my sword just melted. Um, why is it barfing lava on us? It's because it's barfing lava on you. Enjoy that heat from that lava because you're getting first-hand experience.
That's one of the things I hated about certain types of monsters like that is like West monsters
Well, rust monsters, they
or
have to
something.
actually attack your items, while a creature like the magma dragon is attacking it loses your weapon. Mixed with the
Oh,
fact that if it smacks you, You don't want to get smacked because that's being too close to it cooks you.
Yeah, their
Because
blood
Yeah.
is
its defense capabilities are get good scrub because you're about ready to have a very bad day. But for the Drow to make it out of the Underdark, they can't do it by themselves because logistically there's too much things down there that can and will try to eat them, while also being hunted by groups of other Drow. Once they get to the surface, they're still not in the point is depending on where they pop up, depends on what locals are in the areas and how quickly those locals are going to try to come and off them, which happens a lot. Even if you're like, I follow this god here, and this god's a good god. Surface Bro is going, no, we don't believe you. You'll probably get that occasional go, we'll give you a head start before we, get our pitchfork and torches. Or you have until someone gets to town garrison. So enjoy what little life you can up here because you're gonna have to go run because we don't like your kind around here because your kind is infamous for mass killings,
slaughtering.
mass kidnappings. So uh, so like even in realms where you can find non-evil drow, they're not common. They can easily be listed as rare because of how hard it is just for them to get out of the dark, but also because like again the amount of people that trust them are low, and you can thank
It's small.
the rest of the drow community for that because in Dragonlance or yeah Forgotten Realms, Loth has a daughter that a lot of people who know that god exists, excuse me, like to use her as an example. Oh, see, she exists and she's a good drow goddess and she has good drow. It's like, yeah, in very sparse, scattered conclaves that are pretty well hidden, and it states that they're not even fully trusted or even liked by anyone that knows they're there, while they know the exact location or just that they're in the area. Why? Because they don't like or trust drow. Not to mention the fact that there's no guarantee that that enclave is actually her enclave, because it's also listed that the followers of Loth built false enclaves to trick surface dwellers into a false sense of security so then they can sneak in and yoink them. While at the same time, it's a
Yeah.
trick for the actual followers of that goddess because they don't make those false enclaves easy to find. They're still really hard to find. But if any of those people make it to the surface, or if they'll try to make it to the surface and start looking for it, they'll eventually find one of these false enclaves. Go, oh my god, thank you, this is awesome, boom, because those evil Drow know who's actually a true servant of Loth or not. Because each one of those false enclaves have their own way to figure it out, and they're informed of, hey, these are the drow that made it out of our territories. There's a chance they'll make it to the surface. Keep an eye out for them. So when those heretics show up, these true believers know off the hand if they're who they are and go, oh, we're gonna take care of you. We're gonna make sure no one's following you. Quick, hide in here. Go ahead. Here's some food, some water. Oh, did you pass out because they laced the food and water with lots of sleep poison? Are you being woken up on an altar about ready to be sacrificed because they teleported you back down to the nearest city or to at least the city that you're belong to? Yes, because they're that diabolical, they're that persistent, they're that evil. But that goddess only exists in that one realm because Loth doesn't have children in every single realm she exists in. That's something people ignore. They don't forget it, they ignore it. They push it to the side. And in the realms where she does have children, they're not all the same children. As I said, this goddess I just mentioned is a moon goddess, and she only exists in that single realm. She is not a multi realm. god. She's a single realm goddess. That's her area there. It
Right.
also doesn't help the fact that she's been legitly killed off 3 times by Lost. Not once, not twice, 3 times. And the authors that do those books won't keep her dead. She currently is dead, but she was killed by one guy, brought back by another person, killed by that person, and then brought back by another person because they won't keep her dead. So it's like,
Right. Didn't they kill Loth at one point?
no, Lost has not been legitimately killed. She's been defeated several times, but
I
not
know.
legitimately killed.
I I, I know
Uh,
one of her champions.
she's lost multiple champions. Her avatar, she's lost several avatars, but her herself have not actually been defeated. Well, this moon god has
Oh,
legitly been defeated. Like legitly, Loth has actually killed her. So it's one of those like
yeah.
it's one of those like there's no real good reason why they won't keep this goddess dead, other than the fact that an author will come along and go, I like it, I want it, she's back alive. So it's like give her a break because she's going to be killed again. It's like it's a trope for that goddess. Is she
The
survives just
canon.
long enough to die again. It's like she's a king of gods. She only has
Right.
she's only died 3 times, but she's still the king of the gods. So it is somewhat like, hilarious that people don't actually like to read all the information, or at least a majority of information, because it's hilarious. But it's mainly plot armor that lets Drow get out of the Underdark. It's plot armor that lets them get to where they're going and actually exist. Drizzt is the biggest example of a plot armor driven character. Because if you remove the plot armor, if you remove the side characters that died so he can exist in the format we know him today, we don't have Drizzt. We have this short story of how a Drow failed to get out of his society and died.
And we
He is
don't have
a
like 9 books dedicated toward his
yeah,
story.
yeah. There wouldn't like 9 books. There wouldn't be 9 books. He wouldn't be an important character with inside the entire arc of that entire realm. But moving on from the slightly depressing race, by slightly I mean actually depressing race of Drow, there is a wide array of elves. Like you
Moon
remember
elves, snow elves.
last week's episode where we mentioned there was 15 different species of dwarves, technically
But wait,
16.
there's more.
Elves took that as it's like elves took it as a personal challenge, and these are elves coming from 6 books, not 7. So there is technically more out there, but it's like elves took it as a personal challenge and went, we can beat that. So there's technically 24 different elven species. Some of them are pretty similar but different. For instance, high elves, there's the core high elf, there's the King McKellamore high elf, there's the Sylvanesti, also known as high elves, but they not only go by Sylvanesti, but they're not
Isn't
technically
the
the same.
isn't the gray elves considered high elves? Too?
No,
No, the Grey Elves are their own thing. There
I
is
thought they were.
no, they're not the same. High and Grey Elves, people mix it up
Oh,
a lot, but High Elves and Grey Elves are two separate elven species.
no,
And
that's
there
weird.
is in the Kingdom of Kelmar there is the Grey Elves there are slightly different, just how in that same realm their Drow are different but the same. Their Wild and Wood are different but the same because uh, even though the Dark Elves, also known as Drow, still go by Drow in the Kingdom of Kelmar, the other ones do use their own different names because what what the average person calls us, but here's what we call ourselves, and it's not the same as like normal wild elves that go by the Gurgash or the wood elves that go by Sylvan. And then when you
Yeah.
get to other realms, there's the green elves, which are also wild elves. Not the same as the other wild elves. Because they're both wild elves, go by different names and slightly different statistics, so they and societies. They're similar but not the same. There's two different wood elves, similar not the same. You have the Sylvan and the Copper. Copper is because of their skin tone.
Yeah.
Then there's also
And
the
then there's the sun
Wilder
and gold.
elves. Not wild, wilder, which are the
Okay,
Kaganesti.
Wilder.
still don't understand how
Okay.
they can have
The
wild elves
Wilder green
pretty
elves.
wild.
It, I don't know. They're similar in a lot of ways to the wild elves, but different. Um,
Right.
yeah, and
There's the green elf.
don't get me started on the freaking aquatic elves. And I already said green elf.
That's right.
The
Elves need to
aquatic,
be able to
What
survive
did you?
underwater.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, there's the generic aquatic elf that likes to go by sea elf. Then there's the aquatic elf that likes to go by aquatic elf. Not the similar, not the same. Then there's the Garganest, the Dark Nasty and the Dimer Nasty that also like to go by sea elves. Their big differences is the Dark and Nasty can turn into porpoises. The other
Oh.
one can turn. I can't remember what they can turn into, but it's like we want to be the same, but we want to be different. So how do we be different? Throw
Yeah.
in some level adjustments and turn into an animal. Porpoise. Uh,
Then there's the sun and gold elves.
the sun elves are the same as the gold elves.
Really? Oh, okay.
Yeah, because the sun elf
I thought they
is
were
what
different.
they is their common name that people call them, while gold is their preferred name. Just how the moon elves also
I
go
know
by
that.
silver. The Avriel go
I
by
know that.
winged.
I know that they're practitioners of arcane and divine, but
It
they usually.
it is somewhat again unsurprising that a majority, if not all, of the elves like arcane magic. It's one of those what one doesn't like arcane. It's like let's go through the list. Even ones you would think would be more in tune with nature-based things are still like, oh, they like to do arcane magic as well. But it's like, but they would be better druids or rangers. It's like, yeah, we'll just
Right.
cast some arcane fireball for everyone. Uh, but as I said, it's like they took the personal challenge and went where it's gonna boom. And like I said in episode 2, I did not go deep diving into every single book to see just how many elves there really were.
You should do
Be-
that one day.
One day
Quite
I
a
might
bit.
do that. I might end up going, well, here's the books I went through. Like, here's the number of books, and here's all the different books. And it's like I verified if they're actually just the same or different. Different, and it's like, oh, here's how they differ by racial traits. Here's how they differ by social traits. It's like what actually makes them different. Because some of the elves are bigger than the other ones. So there's several, I can't remember ones, that are actually the same height as like humans. So it's like,
Yeah.
hey. Uh, but some of the funny things that makes you go, why? What? It's like, why have an elf good for that environment, but also not good for that environment? One of the biggest examples are the snow elves. They look cool. They look like they belong in cold environments, but all they get
Uh,
different from
survive cold.
high elves is they what stat they get a bonus to and a minus to is what they switch. They don't get any sort of resistance, no sort of bonus to that whole environment. Unlike the
I thought they get
glacial armor,
endurance.
no, they don't. All they get is slightly different
Oh,
stats. They don't get the cold endurance feat. They don't get a resistance to cold. They don't get a bonuses for cold effects. They literally is here's what you get right here. You're you're a
They live in the
variant of
Arctic
a high
tundra.
elf. That's pretty much
They,
it.
okay.
They put them in Siberia and don't give them any way to
Yeah,
survive.
yeah. Unlike dwarves that went, okay, we have glacier and we have Arctic. What's the difference between them? Besides size
Mhm.
category, one actually gets bonuses against cold effects. The other one is immune to cold effects. So they actually went, we want them to live in this cold environment. We want them to thrive in this cold environment. And then turn around and go, nah, snow elves, you just you're just a you're just a variant of the high elf. That's literally what it is.
You're the elven
Mm.
equivalent of an Eskimo.
Exactly. That's really it. That's the big difference. Um, so it's like one of those like why? So to a certain degree, they did do some of the elves slightly dirty by like using the snow elf as an example of what not to do for a race that's good for environment because it's not good for the environment. It's just in the environment. They're using everything that the humans and other non-Arctic races are using to do it. And the thing that makes it worse, the book they come from is called Frostburn. The book that's infamous for if you don't have the right of stuff to even resist cold effects, you're going to die in a course of a few minutes because a random frostburn thing went up. This area is now being dumped in like 20 feet of snow. Ice is falling from the sky. If you don't make this
You would think they would give
403
them a
rounds,
spell
you're
like
going to die.
ability or something like
Well, yet you would
But if you're
assume,
a snow elf, you're perfectly fine because you're supposed to be here.
yeah, it's like you would assume that they would give something.
that. Right. A
Uh,
cold resistance at least.
yeah, because they glacier dwarves come from the same book, and they get stuff first cold. A big thing's what they get is stuff first cold. While snow elves are just we're just cool looking high elves because they do look cool. They are very neat people, but it's just where their key stats are that make them different from a standard high elf. So their uniqueness is more in their culture and where they happen to live, not in their actual racial attributes, which is a neat take. That instead of just going, we're going to take a race, give it all this stuff here, and then make people deal with it. It's we're going to make it similar to humans and have diversity in the high elf to just put it over here, and just pretty much have it be culturally different than normal high elves. But then on the
Right.
same leaf, they'll go over and they'll go, we're going to have a list of elves that have the ability to survive underwater. And not even to the same degree, because um, when it comes to their gills, some of them can survive out of water a lot longer than other ones because they don't even have the same penalties for their gills. For the most part, it's you have to do stuff every hour or suffer penalties. While another one's like, oh, uh, for every 20, you have to spend an hour a day in water, non-consecutively, before you start taking penalties. So for every equivalent of an hour you spend submerged in water, not just wet, but submerged in water, you're golden. While other ones are, if I spend an hour outside of water, I start dying.
Right.
And then they make it they go even a step further by how they make it so they can survive better by literally going, well, these two can turn into aquatic creatures that can help them do it, while this one just swims. Well, these ones just swim fast, which is funny because these ones swim at the same speed. But I'm going to turn into a porpoise, which when they turn into a porpoise, they lose their gill ability. Therefore, they still need to go to the surface to breathe as a porpoise. So it's like have them turn into
Uh,
something that still keeps them at that depth. Because turning into a porpoise means you have to stay at a certain depth or you're going to start drowning. Because you get the
Right.
contour of the porpoise, you don't get water breathing because that's an air breathing creature. So there have to be coastal line sea elves, but they're not depicted as coastal line sea elves. They're depicted as out in the actual sea elves, to where it's like they're they're a couple hundred to a couple thousand feet below the surface of the water at any particular point for their towns and villages, but that they turn into an air breathing creature.
Well, how fast does the change take place?
Us, it works just how the wild shape ability of a druid works, which is like 6 seconds. But at the same time, uh, if you don't subconsciously recognize that you need to be at the surface to do the change initially, what you're doing is you're changing into porpoise with water in your lungs already. Because the change doesn't expel the water from your lungs. So you have to be in somewhere that has an air pocket or at the surface of the water to actually turn into it so you can properly expel the water from your lungs so you don't instantaneously start drowning when you turn into a freaking porpoise. So do you see
Well,
how
then,
they did them dirty?
yeah, but I mean, you could be at the surface and go, I need to get down below really quickly, turn into a porpoise, and then when you're about to run out of air, turn back into an elf and you're golden.
Well, and that would be the only logical thing to do. But my thing is, why a porpoise? I can see
Because
why
they're
they didn't
fast.
go shark because that's a Sahagin thing, but there's other fish that are faster, well, other sea things that are faster than a porpoise. Turn into a barracuda or a dire barracuda, and you're making that distance without having to worry about drowning at all.
Because porpoises are not are helpful sea creatures and are not seen as let's skewer it because it might eat me.
If you're part of a race that turns into a creature, you can you usually have a better relationship with that creature, and or you can go,
Like
why
the
is there
starry
a
elf.
lone barracuda falling down towards the village? Oh, it's probably one of our people that are to the surface coming with a message. And then as it gets closer, roughly either before or at the same time any aquatic-based ranged combat to take place, it stops and turns into a sea elf. So therefore, you don't actually stress. It's a barracuda bug bearing down at us. Oh dear God, save us! It's a who's that? They're coming in a hurry. Um, it's like you technically don't even have to be a barracuda. You choose literally any other fish. Obviously, not, again, not shark because it's a hog, but any other type of fish to turn into that's technically better suited than a porpoise. Because if you're trying
You
to
are
be,
always to change that. You're a DM.
yeah, yeah, but then you get arguments with people like if you're going to change into something more useful than that. Like, do you know what I mean? People will I'm gonna turn into just, I'm gonna change it so they turn into just a normal barracuda. Do you know how people will go, you need to do it to a dire barracuda because that's gonna be more useful in combat. It's like, this
Yeah, but
ability
then
is
you
not
go,
something
yeah,
they normally combat in. It's for travel, it's for entertainment. It's just a neat thing they can do. I'm not gonna go out of the way to choose something that's better combat. Because if I was honestly gonna do that, I would choose something that's a true tank like the Dunkleosaurus.
Hmm.
So it's like,
yeah, but isn't that like a large sized creature?
so it's the dire barracuda.
Okay. Well, maybe it's not the dire barracuda because they can't change from medium size to large size. They can
Yeah,
go from medium to medium.
yeah. So changing to something more accurate to them. Uh, But then you also have the people go, well, there's medium-sized sharks. Like, no, no, no. A shark thing, that's a Zahagan thing. And it doesn't help the fact that you count technically as a shark at that point, which means if a Sahuagin shows up, you are now stuck in that form till the duration of the effect wears off, or you die because the Sahuagin's going to treat you as a pet now because they can. Uh, So even though DMs can make the executive decision to switch it to a more advantageous creature, yes, they can choose a medium-sized octopus because of the depth they like to live in, and that's going to be more useful in more ways than one than just swimming because they can use it to help carry more things, move around. Uh,
You get a second heart.
yeah, they just have it do random things. Uh, But the moment you start doing that, it's the moment you start having people literally going, well, if you're going to change this about them, change that, change this, change that, change that. They're going to look at their gill effect and how horrible it freaking is, and they're going to not request, but demand that they get the true amphibious trait, despite the fact that they're not supposed to be an amphibious race. They're supposed to be a race that dwells purely underwater because they're not a we're going to go do stuff on the surface. They're if we have to get on a boat, we'll get on a boat. We're not going to stay there very long, but we're not going to go on doing land ventures. We're not going to go running around in a surface city. We're going to be pure unadulterated underwater because they're not designed that way. They don't think that way. They're like, we're here, you're there. Who cares? One of the things that they occasionally like to do with some of the elven races, though, is have them slightly similar but slightly different, and that's, like I said when I mentioned earlier, why there's multiple wood elves. There's the I didn't report down what the Kingdom of Kalamar what elves call themselves, but they don't call themselves as the same as the other two, which is Sylvan and Copper. Same with the wood, which is the Grugash and the green for not wood, but the wild. Wow, the elves are messing with my brain. There's like a lot of them are extremely similar stat wise and culture wise, but not the same. And they don't particularly always do things for the actual benefit, because for a lot of them, they're just variants of high elves. That's really all it is. They're just slightly different from a high elf. One of the cooler ones that uh, actually gets things that you can count as benefits are like the Averials, which are the winged elves. Those are pretty cool elves. Because they literally have big wings. They're pretty much winged high elves, is the easiest way to describe it. They don't get anything that counts as bad, they just get lots of neat things. And who's going to argue with the ability to fly? I'm not.
Where are they located?
Forgotten Realms.
Mostly. Okay. Do you know where in Forgotten Realms?
Uh, Mountains and forests. It's one of those things that they're not necessarily just like with a how there's a lot of elves in Forgotten Realms because there's technically one, two, three, four, five, six, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 different elven species within Forgotten Realms. There's the ones people are going to be more known about, and then the ones people aren't going to be so familiar with. And it's because some are more prevalent than others, like the Sylvanesti, which are high elves. A lot of people know about them there. Uh, and it is one of those things that a lot of people, because of their lack of knowledge on how different realms treat different uh, elven kinds, a lot of people do to confuse the Sylvanesti with the Sylvan. They're not the same. So, like I said, the Sylvan
Right.
Nesti are a variant of high elves. Yeah, they like forests. Yeah, they like to keep themselves up, but they're not the same as the wood elves that are the Sylvan elves. They're not the same. They they're similar, just like most of the elves are similar, but they're not the same. But people confuse them anyways and treat them as if they are literally the same, and then they get argumentative and a little disrespectful, and you're like, no, they're no, no, they're not. They're not. It's like I'd rather play a Sylvan than a Sylvanesti because a Sylvan is actually different. I mean, it's more different and farther from a high elf than the Sylvanesti are. But in like some, like I said, there's a lot of elven races. If I were to do a deep dive into all of the other books I have access to, I could most likely find more, and then do a write up on where if I find any variants where they differ on when it comes to stats and culture. Yeah, that itself is like, and it would be an entire long episode doing a deeper dive into all of those, where a huge portion will cover like, oh, here's all the different high elves and what they like to call themselves, what realms they fall in, and here's how they're different. It That's a lot of information dumping, and like I said, right now I'm sitting at 24 different elves. That there doesn't need to be 24 different elves, especially because a lot of them are just different versions of another. So it gets a little hectic. For people who are indecisive, so if a DM would go, well, here's a list of elves, and there were about 24 different elves. If you have any form of not being precise on here's what I want to do because you're being indecisive, 24 options is a lot of different options, especially if you have to go digging through the different books, reading on what actually makes them different, and then trying to figure out what exactly you want to be. It can get confusing and
Yeah.
borderline just. Does again? I thought 15 dwarves was a lot of dwarves. That's not a lot of dwarves compared to 24 elves. that's that's pretty good. Jay, those questions.
Oh, which one?
Don't fucking say a
Hold on.
word. Just give me a moment.
I was
Just
lagging
give me
there
a
for a
Stop.
moment.
bit.
Compose yourself and stop
Just
it. Just stop.
Okay, stop
I don't know if
it.
you caught it, but I caught
Yep,
it immediately.
I got it. Don't worry
That
about it,
don't worry about it, almighty person.
Toyoto. Don't worry about it. Lux
Okay,
just did it again. That's all.
almighty guest. Apparently that's my trend for not having technical
Stop
difficulties.
it.
I'm having difficulties.
You are a
Almighty
So
difficulty.
I am.
guest, the do you have any questions that haven't been answered yet?
So why the trance not? I mean, they sleep, but they don't.
It the trance-like sleep they enter, it does technically count as sleep. Uh, but elves they do a meditative like state when they're sleeping. So they are still
Yeah,
Right.
getting the
true
necessary
sleep.
sleep they need. It functions just like normal sleep, but instead of just laying down and getting comfortable, they just either they can lay down if they want, but they just enter just this state where they're technically turning off a lot of their functions to get to
Now,
that sleep.
now, is that for all elves in general, or
In general, yes, unless it specifically states that these elves sleep normally, or these elves sleep like that, or those elves over here sleep like this over here. It's a meditative like sleep.
okay?
So it technically is still sleep, but it's like how you go to a Buddhist monastery and you can see people in this. It's like, are they asleep? No, they're meditating. It's their mind. It a lot of their senses and stuff are either extremely dulled or turned off, so they can actually get the rest they need. Now there is players out there that have tried to go, well, I'm technically meditating, not sleeping, so I don't get all those penalties because I'm not actually. It's like you are that the meditation state is how you sleep. So the -2 listen checks still applies because you're in a deep stated meditative state. Deep stated meditative. You're in that state.
Deep stated.
Yeah, deep stated where like your outside stuff is turned off. Like I said, it's either really, really dulled or turned off. Off. So when it comes straight down to it, there is no like, oh, I perfectly hear everything around me. It's like then you're not meditating.
Right. So it's
Because
not like a more forged kind of resting,
if
but
you're a construct, you technically don't need sleep, nor do you need to eat, drink, or breathe, which are
more drink.
can be
Yeah.
bonuses. But the con is you don't get normal healing. Constructs have to
Yeah.
have something come along to heal them. If you're a construct that has acquired spell-like abilities, and or anything that requires um, rest, you have to still technically rest. It's just you're not sleeping. You're kind of just sitting there doing nothing for 8 hours.
Constructs need mending.
Okay.
So even though like you're not sleeping like everyone else, the constructs, it's like in my world, the weirwoods, which are halfling sized constructs, when they still have to do a restful period when they're recovering their spells if they go magic users, because they do have sorcerer, or not sorcerers, but they do go the path of wizards when they go arcanes because that's
Right.
their preferred method. Uh, they still have to have 8 hours of uninterrupted rest. That does not mean they're asleep because they don't have to sleep. It's just them kind of just sitting there going, man, this is boring. So, unlike an elf that would have to enter a meditative like state, the weirwoods are, as long as I'm not doing anything that counts as an actual activity, I can sit
Or
here.
yeah.
So, a weirwoods in any particular state, if they're part of the party, are the best to go on watch because everyone else gets to literally sleep a full 8 hours uninterrupted at all while they're sitting there going,
Right.
I'm bored.
I'm bored. It's 8 hours of me technically in a restful state. So as long as I don't do anything that counts as an activity or a monster shows up, I'm good. I mean, you still have to take into account of the time it takes to set up camp and break down camp, the amount of time it takes to prep spells, amount of time it takes to proper eating stuff. So it's technically not like, oh, we're only spending like 8 hours of the day resting. You're technically spending closer to 10 because it does take a while to set up and pack up a tent because you have to pull it off your backpack, set it all up, put all your shit in it, take all your crap out, break it down, and then reattach it, attach it, and because there's also using the restroom, doing any sort of hygiene things you're doing. So technically, it's still a short time period than normal. Because if you didn't have an entity like a weirwood in the party, you're looking at um, because people have to have rest. You're looking at depending on the number of people, 10 to 12 hours, depending on how it's broken up, of a restful period of just people trying to sleep, not including the setup and breakdown of camp.
Right.
Uh, so there is, but like I said, there is a lot of people that try to get away with a lot of the sleep related shenanigans by going, I'm in a meditative like state. It's like, no, no, you're not. Not when it comes to, I can still hear. I'm still perfectly aware of my surroundings. It's like, no, you're either in a meditative state that counts as this rest, or you're not. You don't get to ignore these penalties and then be able to go, there's a monster. I stand up and whip out my sword. It's like, no, you get no. If you're able to do that, then you're not in that actual meditative state. You're not actually resting. You don't get the benefits of any of the rest at that point because you're not actually resting. You're in a state of preparedness to leap up and attack.
Right.
That's not resting. It's just like everyone else that's resting. You have a -10 to your listen check to hear the entity creeping up on the party, which may sound horrible because it is horrible.
But you're
That's
sleeping.
why, because you're sleeping. That's also why if a majority of the party doesn't have good sensory inputs as a good listening spot, there's a chance people are dying. And coming
Coup de
from
grace.
experience of people not having good stuff there, one of my favorite examples to use of if you're going to have someone on watch, make sure it's someone who actually has spot and listen, even if it's cross class. Is it's an Orlando campaign I was running. They chose the group fighter to be on first watch. Well, he had an 11 wisdom, nothing in spot or listen. Another party members was turned for them to roll for the encounter. They got a 1. They rolled for the difficulty of it, and then they rolled for what it was. So the monster showed up because it passed its spot and listen checks to discover the party, see what's happening, and sneak up on the party. Because it wasn't a dumb monster that just started saying it was pretty intelligent. So it went, I'm going to come from an angle that the person on the watch isn't looking because they're facing the fire, paying more attention to the fire than their surroundings. So no spot check because it's coming from the rear. They also horrifically failed their listen check to notice this large size entity creeping up on them. So it crept up on them, and because the person loves watching die rolls, so there is no DM shenanigans when it comes to, oh, did you just roll a nat 20 to hit me? Yes. Did you just roll another nat 20 to confirm that? Can you please stop watching my dice? Did you roll
That's why the
almost
DMs.
max damage with the times 3 crit weapon? Can you please stop watching? Well, please stop. Because you're
What's their
confirming this.
stats?
Because yeah, your fighter just got one shot by a large size falchion. And
That's why it's good to humble yourself sometimes.
that's not humbling. That person got cut in half. The party monk ended up running hide up in a tree. The party Wujin ran off into the woods with none of their equipment. The party samurai in their tent got up, peeked out the tent, saw the monster, went back in the tent, and started donning their armor, which takes, without help, a minute to don.
About a minute. Yeah.
And by
So,
that time, everybody's dead.
well, yeah, the fighter's
That's
dead. The
10
monk is
rounds.
hiding.
10
Hiding.
rounds.
The Wu-Jin, which is a type of Oriental caster, is running for her life. So the monster just runs up and swings at the tent because it's pretty obvious that this person hitting the tent where they're at, where they're standing, because they're standing up in the tent trying to put on their armor. It's not a big, huge freaking tent. It's an A. It's a type of A-frame tent, so it's like you can see him bumping into stuff. So it just swings, hits him. He survives the hit, but the tent's now ruined. He doesn't have his full armor on, so now he's fighting with partial armor on instead of trying to run or anything, which he should have probably done in the first place. So he dies. The monster looks up in the tree at the monk who's hop going. That's giving a look of what up because they acknowledge
so,
themselves. So it just pretty much
so
picks up the two dead bodies and pretty much all of the party's gear because it has the strength and capacity to pick it up and just walks on off away because they put the person that has absolutely no sensory input on watch, then followed up by the party samurai being the whole I don't run, I fight. No, you die.
yeah, I gotta go.
Oh, oh, depth. It's
All right.
around that time for you. Uh, for
Yep.
all who are watching, our guest unfortunately does have to bug out a little bit early before the episode ends. Uh, thank you for joining us, almighty guest of guestiness. Because you are our first guest. Hopefully, we can get you for future episodes.
Yeah.
Welcome to Zoom first.
Sure.
Yeah, because you are the first, and hopefully not the last guest we have.
We
Right.
can
But
only
thank you.
hope.
Yeah, we hope. So thank you for joining us. Thank you for being part of our shenanigans. Hopefully you can say you walked around with new information or at least enlightened information.
Oh yeah. No.
And I'll see you on the morrow.
See you on tomorrow, man.
Yay! Now
And
we
then
can
there were
talk
two.
trash behind his back. Ah, yeah. Um, but no, like I said, it's that's one of the primary examples of make of how being asleep can uh make an encounter so much more dangerous while make not making sure that someone who actually has a bonus is actually up.
Well, if they're
Um,
up against canopy creepers, it doesn't matter. You can
it,
have a high everything and still miss it.
it yeah, because the
Yeah.
canopy creepers, their vines are extremely quiet and naturally just dangling down is a DC 20 just to see it dangling there. Not to mention it trying to actively stealthily get that in there.
And
There's
they
a
can
what does the
part and they can
forest
wipe.
make?
Yeah. Well, they can wipe a party
Yes. Oh
at
God,
night.
yes. Uh,
I have personal knowledge of this fact.
who had to be resurrected?
Yes. Because canopy creeper, that's why.
Yeah. But yeah, like I said, there's a lot of elves. Some are just weird variants of the high, and some actually are unique and cool. Like like I said, I like the winged because they're generally nice elves, and they fly. And unlike other races that may have weird rules about it, because there's some races where their arms are their wings and they have to use their feet to fly. Winged elves are literally wings with elves.
Doesn't that make their bones hollow like birds?
Technically no, because you have to remember, D&D doesn't follow uh actual real life physics to a T. Just if they follow to a T, the winged elves would most likely, in order to technically fit properly, they would probably be a lot smaller than what they are, or their wings would be a lot bigger and more robust wings to be able to gain lift.
Okay, so how big are their wings and what do they normally look like?
Um, think of an angel. So pretty much, yeah. Take an angel, give him pointy ears, and there's your wings. With the only real exception of the wings aren't really depicted as being vastly huge. Because normal
Right.
creatures, in order to have successful flight, their wings, each wing is roughly the same length as they are tall. So if you're 5'6", each wing is going to be at least 5'6", giving you an 11-foot wingspan. Because that's how logic feeds it. D&D doesn't take that logic in, and most of the creatures that fly don't actually match that. The closest you're going to get are creatures that are just upscaled versions of real creatures, like any of the giant owls, giant ravens, giant eagles. Their wings will be more accurately depicted to how big they should be, while certain things like fairies, like any of the fairies, their wings are nowhere near as big as they technically should be, and a lot of them are just wings that don't look like they should actually be able to give them proper flight, let alone the maneuverability they have. Like the
But they're butterfly.
Kathleen, the what?
The fairy. Lots of fairies have butterfly wings.
Yeah, it's like the Kathleen. They're fey rays. They're the size of a halfling, and their wings look like leaves. And they're not like huge wings either. Either. Uh, so like their wingspan isn't like 6 feet or something like that. It's close to like 4 feet, which is not much taller than what they actually are. The winged elves are around that same thing, where they, let's say the average height is like 5 feet. You would expect them to have at least 10-foot wingspan. No, they probably have 8 at best, and that's because D&D doesn't actually take in 100% of how things should be, because of the A, it's a fantasy game, so they get leeway, and B, coolness factor. Some things, if you give them accurate proportions to what they should have, don't look that cool, because it's like it looks too big. It's one of those like goofy things. So even though it makes sense for like twice their height to be their wingspan, it doesn't always fall like that because the coolness factor, and it's a fantasy game. It's also why you end up with creatures that technically can't actually exist because they're aberrations. Let's take the beholder. The way it exists in its format biologically doesn't actually work, and people won't stop making up their changing their minds about how they feed, because they're pretty much a with head with one eye and little tendrils out.
Oh wait, those aren't beholders.
A head with a single eye with tendrils.
Yeah,
That's a boulder.
yeah. I
Yeah,
was giving it a mouth, and that's not a beholder.
yeah. So it's like, where's their stomach? Where's their stomach? Where's all their rest of their stuff? It's an aberration. It doesn't function normally, and because it's a game, they can go. It doesn't function like everything else because this is a fantasy game.
Yeah.
Uh, it, it's just one of those things start to get real weird real quick with a lot of things. So even though they like to try to add some form of realism to some of their things, like the sea elves needing to uh, spend a certain amount of time submerged in water in order to not die on land.
Right.
And that varies, like I said earlier, from like one goes, as long as it spends 1 hour a day submerged, it can spend the rest of that day not in water, because it's like they spend 23 hours out of water before they start having problems. While other ones are like, oh, I spend an hour outside of water, I'm I'm suffocating. It's like I legitimately have to run towards water, and it can't just be a bucket of water because they're sea elves. It has to be salt water. They're not freshwater elves; they're seawater elves, well, saltwater elves. And it's not just simply getting themselves wet; it's they actually have to submerge themselves to actually breathe. So it's like, oh hey, you have this amount of time to get to that water over there, or your character's dead. So that's why it's something like they do some of them a little bit more dirty than other ones. Uh, and my to someone ends this episode with the whole one of the things I don't particularly like what they did with it with majority of them is they are just slightly different versions of high elves. Like I said, the snow elves are slightly different than because a lot of them are just that they're slightly different. They don't have actual different traits. They're just I'm a high elf, but I'm adapted for this environment because this is my culture, and I don't have anything to actually support it. Then they go
And I really should not be here because I don't have any special abilities that keep me from uh, dying from frostbite.
pretty much, yeah. It's like they have nothing to support why they're there, and especially if you look at other races that are there, they're there. It's like one of the unknown facts is there's a type of snow human, frostfolk. They are actually humans that, due to a pact they made, can now survive in Arctic environments. There is a legit human, aquatic human that can breathe and act work underwater. There is Coco. You have to give me a moment. Coco, come. Don't give me that look, dog. I'm getting aggressive side eye, and I know it. So it's like kind of funny how no matter how they worked it in, some of these races are actually fit for this environment and can survive in this environment because they're given stuff. And then it's like we're gonna have a race that looks like it belongs there. The name suggests it belongs there, but we're not giving it anything to actually survive. Because if they would have given like the bonus feed of cold endurance, that would make more sense. A cold resistance, even if it's like a tiny one, that that helps. No, they're high elves that look kind of cooler, and they do that with a lot of these elves, as in one of those things that you could get rid of the variants of the wood elves and give them just keep the names and get rid of all the other wood elves and voila, just use this one wood elf here and you're technically golden. Same with the wild elves, the high elves, same thing. The gray elves, same thing. Uh, the moon, the sun elves, the painted elves, the snow elves. They're all just one weird, slightly different version of one another. The aquatic elves are probably the biggest ones that are more adapted to their environment, with a bunch of other stuffs there because they actually can live in that environment. Like even the drow get a bunch of stuff that help them with the Underdark.
Yes,
So it's just one of those like we're gonna have all these elves, but only a majority of them are gonna actually be different in not just culture and appearance, but in actual statistics. Well, all these other ones are just weird variants of one another with slightly different things. So it just gets really, really why. Because at first I was like, wow, that's a lot. Then I was like, dude, double checking on some reading and stuff, and I went, that may be a high number, but I can technically start lowering the number simply because like well, these high elves are, like I said, these high elves all might as well be the same thing. So let's just lower that, just give it a bunch of different names. So it's almost like it's disappointing because like you see this, you see the name, you expect all this cool stuff, but then you start reading and it's like they put your hopes up here and then they kick your feet out from underneath you.
So the takeaway is disappointing elves.
Lots of disappointed elves because they are just different versions of an high elf. That's literally all they are. Uh, but on that note, we will be ending today's broadcast. Uh, like almost an hour before we usually do. Uh, Thank you for watching. Hope you have a wonderful day. And
Hope you do
remember,
something.
behave. Goodbye.